Welcome to Books in 10. Remember, we're raffling an iPhone when we reach 10,000 subscribers. Like, subscribe, and journey with us into this fantastic book. Share with your friends, and let's create the biggest book community on YouTube together. Oh, there's a link to purchase the book in the pinned comments. Enjoy! We are accepting book requests to create content within. Suggest the best titles in the comments. Now, let's go.
Today we're diving deep into Aristotle's Metaphysics. It grapples with some of the most fundamental questions about reality, knowledge, and the universe.
Yeah.
Have you ever looked up at the night sky and wondered what it all means? What is the nature of existence? What does it mean to truly know something? That's what metaphysics is all about.
It's fascinating how a work written thousands of years ago can still feel so relevant today. Aristotle's insights into the nature of wisdom, the limits of human understanding, and the pursuit of knowledge are as thought-provoking now as they were back then. I know, right? One of the things that really struck me early on was how Aristotle compares practical experience with theoretical knowledge. He calls this theoretical knowledge art, or techne, and uses the example of a physician. A doctor might have all the textbook knowledge in the world, but without practical experience treating patients, they might not be able to actually cure anyone.
It's a great example, and it highlights a key point in Aristotle's thinking. He's not saying that experience is worthless. In fact, he acknowledges that experience is often crucial for achieving practical results. But he argues that techne is superior because it aims to understand the causes behind things. It's not just about knowing that something works, but why it works, what makes it tick.
So to really know something, we need to go beyond just observing what works. We need to understand the underlying mechanisms, the reasons behind the results.
Precisely. And this pursuit of understanding, of grasping those fundamental causes and principles, is what Aristotle considers the essence of wisdom. He even says that wonder, that sense of awe and curiosity about the world, is what drives us to philosophize in the first place.
That makes so much sense. I can definitely relate to that feeling of wonder leading me to ask those big questions. But if wisdom is about understanding the deepest causes, wouldn't that make it pretty elusive, maybe even unattainable at times?
That's an important point, and Aristotle acknowledges that the most profound knowledge, the kind of knowledge that deals with the fundamental principles of reality, is often the most difficult to attain. Think about it this way. We can easily perceive a tree with our senses, but grasping abstract concepts like being or unity requires a different kind of intellectual effort. It takes us beyond our immediate sensory experience and into the realm of pure thought.
So the more abstract the concept, the harder it is to really know it.
Exactly. And this challenge of understanding abstract concepts is something that preoccupied many early philosophical schools. Aristotle himself mentions a whole bunch of them in Metaphysics.
Right.
We have the pre-Socratics, like Anaxagoras, who believed that reason was a force shaping the world, and Empedocles, who focused on the interplay of love and strife.
And don't forget the Pythagoreans. They were obsessed with numbers, seeing them as the foundation of reality. They believed that the universe was this perfectly harmonious system governed by mathematical principles. I mean, that's pretty mind-blowing for their time, right?
Absolutely. It challenged traditional ways of thinking and paved the way for later scientific discoveries. But even with all these different approaches to understanding reality, Aristotle wasn't afraid to critique them. He wasn't a fan of everything these early philosophers proposed, especially the concept of forms, which was central to Plato's philosophy.
Why was he so critical of the forms? They sound kind of cool, like these perfect blueprints existing in some other realm.
That's the thing. For Aristotle, they were a bit too otherworldly. He argued that these abstract forms, separate from the physical world, didn't really help us understand how things actually are.
So he's basically saying, what's the point of these forms if they don't explain anything about the world we experience?
Exactly. He saw it as an unnecessary level of abstraction. This skepticism towards abstract concepts that don't directly relate to our experience leads Aristotle to raise another interesting question. Can we truly know anything before we even begin learning? It's like asking whether knowledge is something we're born with, or if it's something we acquire through experience and reason.
Wow, that's a big one. It makes you question the very foundation of knowledge itself.
It does, and that's what makes Aristotle so fascinating. He's constantly pushing us to think deeper, to question our assumptions, and to confront the limits of our understanding. And he doesn't stop there. He goes on to explore this really dense and fascinating topic of being. It turns out that even a simple word like being isn't as straightforward as it seems.
I have to admit, that's where I started to feel a little lost. What did he mean by being? having multiple meanings.
Well, he pointed out that being can refer to so many different things: substance, qualities, potential, actuality. The list goes on. And he argued that understanding the primary principles of things, the fundamental building blocks of reality, is essential for truly comprehending what it means to be at all.
Okay, so we need to understand the basic principles things if we want to grasp what it means to be. That sounds like a pretty tall order.
It is, but that's Aristotle for you, always challenging us to think in new and unexpected ways. He also introduces this concept of contraries, like unity and plurality, as key to understanding reality. He argues that reality isn't always black and white, but often exists in this dynamic interplay of opposites.
So to understand being, we need to grapple with these fundamental principles and the interplay of opposites. It sounds like we're just getting started.
You're absolutely right, and it's going to get even more interesting as we explore how Aristotle tackles the problem of contradiction.
The problem of contradiction. What's that all about?
Well, have you ever encountered someone who claims that something can be both true and false at the same time? That's what Aristotle is grappling with here. He sees this as a fundamental challenge to logic and the possibility of meaningful discourse. Imagine a world where truth and falsehood are interchangeable. It would undermine our ability to communicate, reason, and even make decisions.
So it's not just an abstract philosophical puzzle, but something that has real practical consequences. I can see why that would be a problem.
Exactly. If we can't agree on basic principles of truth and falsehood, then how can we have any kind of rational conversation or debate? Aristotle uses everyday examples to illustrate how absurd this idea is. He asks, for example, why would we bother to walk to Megara if it's simultaneously both there and not there?
That's a great example. It makes the problem of contradiction much easier to grasp. It highlights how essential logic and reason are to our everyday lives.
Exactly. And Aristotle's analysis of this problem lays the groundwork for his exploration of some of the most fundamental concepts in his philosophy, including potency and actuality. But I think we'll save that for part 2 of our deep dive.
I can't wait. It sounds like we're in for another fascinating and challenging exploration of Aristotle's brilliant mind. Stay tuned, everyone, for part 2 of our deep dive into metaphysics.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Aristotle's metaphysics.
Ooh, it feels like forever.
We ended part 1
I know.
on that cliffhanger.
Yes.
Aristotle's takedown of the idea that something can be both true and false.
Right.
At the same time.
Yeah.
That might seem pretty obvious, but trust me, it gets complicated.
Yeah, my brain was already doing somersaults, trying to keep up with all those early philosophers and their ideas. Where do we go from here?
Well, remember how Aristotle was all about understanding the causes behind things?
Yeah.
He takes that same rigorous approach when he's looking at change.
Okay.
Because, let's face it, change is a pretty mind-boggling concept when you really think about it.
Oh, tell me about it. I feel like I'm a different person every year, every month, heck, maybe even every day. So how does Aristotle wrap his head around the fact that everything's in constant flux?
He doesn't shy away from it at all. In fact, he dives right into the heart of change.
Yeah.
But he doesn't just accept it at face value.
Yeah.
He wants to break it down and understand the mechanisms behind it.
Yeah.
And that's where his theory of the 4 causes comes in.
Those causes, again, material, formal, efficient, and final.
You got it. Each one of those causes plays a crucial role in explaining how change happens.
Okay.
So think back to the example of the physician that we were talking about before. The material cause would be the patient's body, the physical stuff undergoing change.
Right.
The formal cause would be the state of health that the doctor is aiming for, the new form that the body takes on.
Okay.
The efficient cause would be the doctor's actions, the treatments they administer, and the final cause, that's the ultimate goal, the restoration of health.
Okay, I see how those causes fit into the context of healing. But what about changes that don't seem to have a purpose? Like, say, a rock eroding away. It doesn't feel like there's a goal or an intention behind that.
Aristotle would say that even in cases like that, where it seems like there isn't a purpose, that there's a final cause. It lies in the natural tendencies or potentialities of the thing itself, the rock's composition, its exposure to the elements. Those inherent properties determine its path of change.
Okay.
It's like an acorn, right? It doesn't choose to become an oak tree, but it's driven by this inner potential to follow that path of development.
So even seemingly random changes are still guided by some underlying principle, like There's a hidden order to the universe, even in all the chaos.
That's a great way to put it. For Aristotle, there's no such thing as uncaused change.
Okay.
Everything happens for a reason, driven by this complex interplay of causes.
Right.
And understanding those causes, he thinks, gives us incredible insight into the nature of reality.
So it's not just about satisfying our intellectual curiosity. There's a practical element to understanding change as well.
Absolutely. Think about it. If you can understand the causes of something, you gain the ability to predict and potentially even influence the outcome. We see this all the time in science, medicine, even in our own personal lives.
Right.
If you can identify the triggers for a bad habit, you're in a much better position to break it.
That's so true. It's like having this secret decoder ring for the universe.
Yeah,
The more we understand about the causes, the more power we have to shape our own destinies.
you're getting it.
Mm-hmm.
Aristotle believed that knowledge is power, and understanding change is one of the most powerful forms of knowledge we can possess.
Yeah.
But now let's shift gears for a moment.
Okay.
Remember how we left off in part 1 talking about being
Mm-hmm.
and how Aristotle argued that it had multiple meanings?
Yes.
Well, it turns out this whole idea of being is intimately connected to another key concept, substance.
Substance, like the physical stuff that makes up the world.
Yes, but it goes deeper than that. For Aristotle, substance is the underlying reality of things, the essence that makes something what it is.
Okay.
It's what persists through change, the whatness that remains constant even as its accidental properties change.
So if I dye my hair blue, I'm still me, the same substance, even though my hair color has changed.
Exactly. The color of your hair is an accidental property, something that can change without altering your fundamental being. But your essential nature, your meanness, remains the same.
Okay, I think I'm starting to wrap my head around substance. But why is it so important to Aristotle?
Because he believes that understanding substance is key to understanding the world around us.
Okay.
He argues that everything we encounter is composed of substance and its various properties or attributes. Think of it like this. Substance is the foundation, and properties are the decorations.
So, like a house. The house itself is the substance. And the paint color, the furniture, those are the properties.
That's a great analogy. And just as a house can change its appearance without ceasing to be a house, so too can substances change their properties without losing their essential identity.
This is making me think about how we perceive the world. We tend to focus on the superficial, the ever-changing properties.
Right.
But Aristotle is urging us to look deeper, to recognize the underlying substance that persists through all that change.
Exactly. He's challenging us to go beyond appearances and grasp the true nature of reality.
Yeah.
And this pursuit of understanding substance leads him to develop another important concept,
Okay.
the categories of being.
Categories of being. Sounds intriguing. What are those?
Well, Aristotle observed that when we talk about being, we use the word in so many different ways. We say things like, the apple is red, Socrates is wise, the horse is running. Each of those statements is attributing a different kind of being to the subject.
So the apples being red is different from Socrates being wise.
Precisely. And Aristotle recognized that these different ways of being could be grouped into distinct categories.
Yeah.
He identified 10 fundamental categories: substance, quantity, quality, relation, place, time, position, state, action, and passion.
Wow, 10 categories. That's a lot to keep track of.
Yeah.
Can you give me some examples of how these categories work in practice?
Sure, let's take the example of a book.
Okay.
Its substance is bookness, its essential nature.
Right.
Its quantity might be 1, its quality heavy, its relation on the shelf, its place in the library, its time published in 2023, and so on.
So these categories help us to break down the different aspects of a thing's being, to analyze it from multiple perspectives.
Exactly. They provide a framework for understanding the complexity of existence, the many ways in which things can be.
This is all incredibly insightful. It's like Aristotle is giving us this toolkit for understanding the world, a set of conceptual lenses through which to view reality.
That's a great way to think about it. His categories of being are a powerful tool for analyzing and making sense of our experience.
Yeah.
And we're not done yet.
Okay.
There's still so much more to explore. In part 3, we'll delve into Aristotle's critiques of other philosophical schools, his analysis of potentiality and actuality, and his fascinating views on the nature of the divine.
I can't wait to see what other mind-bending ideas he has in store for us. Stay tuned for part 3 of our deep dive into Aristotle's Metaphysics, where we'll continue to unravel the mysteries of existence and knowledge. Welcome back to our deep dive into Aristotle's Metaphysics. We've covered so much ground already. from the nature of change to the categories of being.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey.
But as you mentioned at the end of part 2, there's still more to uncover.
There is. We've been focusing on building up Aristotle's own system of thought.
Right.
But he wasn't just working in a vacuum. He was constantly engaging with the ideas of other philosophers, both predecessors and contemporaries.
So it's like he's having this ongoing conversation with the history of philosophy, building upon, challenging, and refining the ideas that came before him.
Exactly. He saw himself as part of a long tradition of inquiry. And one of the things that makes metaphysics so fascinating is how he critiques the views of other philosophical schools, highlighting their strengths and weaknesses.
It's like he's giving us a crash course in the history of philosophy while simultaneously developing his own unique perspective.
That's a good way to put it. He takes on everyone from the pre-Socratics with their various theories about the fundamental elements of reality, to Plato with his theory of forms.
I remember you mentioned earlier that Aristotle wasn't a big fan of Plato's forms. What were his main criticisms?
Well, he argued that the forms were too abstract and removed from the physical world.
Okay.
He believed that true knowledge had to be grounded in our experience of the world around us. Remember his emphasis on substance? For Aristotle, substance is the primary reality. And the forms, as abstract entities existing in some separate realm, didn't adequately explain how things come to be and change in the world we experience.
So he's saying that Plato's forms are interesting, but ultimately don't give us a practical understanding of reality.
Right. He saw them as an unnecessary complication. Instead of explaining the world, they actually create more problems.
That's a bold stance. It's like he's respectfully saying to Plato, I appreciate your ideas, but I think we can do better.
He was definitely confident in his own approach. And this confidence shines through in how he develops his own concepts, like the distinction between potentiality and actuality.
Oh, yes. We touched on this briefly before, but I'd love to dive deeper.
Okay.
It's one of those ideas that sounds deceptively simple at first, but quickly becomes mind-boggling.
It is, but it's also incredibly powerful. Remember how Aristotle emphasized that everything is in a state of change? Well, potentiality and actuality help us understand how that change is possible.
So how do they work?
Potentiality refers to the possibility or capacity for something to be or become something else.
Okay.
It's like the acorn having the potential to become an oak tree.
Right.
Actuality, on the other hand, is the realization of that potential. It's the acorn actually becoming a tree.
So potentiality is the blueprint, and actuality is the finished product.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay.
But it's not just about physical objects.
Right.
It applies to all kinds of change.
Right.
For example, you have the potential to learn a new language,
Uh-huh.
but that potential only becomes actual when you actively engage in the process of learning.
So it's like saying that potential is useless without action. We have to take steps to actualize our potential
Yeah.
and bring about change in the world.
Exactly. And Aristotle believes that this process of actualization is what drives the constant change and development that we see in the universe. Everything is striving to realize its full potential, to become its most actualized self.
That's a beautiful thought. It's like the universe is this ongoing symphony of potential being realized.
It is. And it ties into Aristotle's belief that the universe is purposeful and ordered.
Right.
There's a reason why things are the way they are, a direction to their development.
This brings us back to the concept of the prime mover, right? The ultimate source of all motion and change.
Yes. Remember how we discussed that the prime mover is not a god in the traditional sense, but rather a pure, eternal, and unchanging being. It exists in a state of complete actuality and serves as the ultimate object of desire and aspiration for everything else in the universe.
So everything is drawn towards the prime mover, seeking to emulate its perfection.
That's the idea. And this striving for perfection, this drive to actualize potential, is what sets the entire universe in motion.
It's an incredible concept. It gives the universe a sense of purpose and direction, a grand narrative of unfolding potential.
And it highlights another key aspect of Aristotle's thought, his emphasis on teleology, the idea that everything has a final cause or purpose.
So even seemingly random events are ultimately part of a larger plan. There's a reason why everything happens, even if we don't always see it.
That's a complex question, and it's one that philosophers have debated for centuries.
Right.
But for Aristotle, the answer is a resounding yes. He believed that everything in the universe is interconnected, and that each thing has its own unique role to play in the grand scheme of things.
It's a humbling thought, realizing that we're all part of something much larger than ourselves.
It is, and it encourages us to look beyond our immediate concerns and consider our place in the cosmos, to reflect on our purpose and how we can contribute to the overall good.
This deep dive into metaphysics has been a truly transformative experience. It's challenged me to think differently about the world, about knowledge, and about my own place in the universe.
It's been an incredible journey. Aristotle's Metaphysics is a book that stays with you long after you've finished reading it. It sparks new questions and invites you to keep exploring the mysteries of existence.
What stands out to you most from our exploration?
For me, it's Aristotle's unwavering commitment to reason and his insatiable curiosity. He wasn't afraid to tackle the biggest questions and to develop a comprehensive system of thought that attempted to explain the entirety of reality. And while we might not agree with all of his conclusions, his approach is inspiring. He shows us the power of careful observation, logical reasoning, and a deep respect for the complexity of the world.
I couldn't agree more. This deep dive has been a profound reminder that the pursuit of knowledge is an ongoing journey, and it's a journey that we can all embark on together.
That's a beautiful sentiment, and I encourage all of you listening to pick up a copy of Metaphysics and start your own exploration. You might be surprised by what you discover.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Aristotle's metaphysics. We hope it's inspired you to think deeply about the world and your place in it. Until next time, keep seeking knowledge and keep asking those big questions.